What would you do if you found a mysterious invoice for $47,000 addressed to your husband from a woman you'd never heard of? Sarah Reynolds was 7 months pregnant, living what she thought was the perfect life in Seattle, when that exact scenario turned her world upside down. What started as suspected infidelity quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. Personal life consulting services, emotional support sessions, spa treatments worth thousands. But this wasn't just about an affair. This was about a carefully orchestrated plan that would put both Sarah and her unborn daughter in mortal danger. You see, Jessica Kane wasn't just any mistress. She was a predator with a deadly pattern, and Sarah had unknowingly become her next target. The question wasn't whether Sarah's marriage could survive the betrayal. It was whether Sarah herself would survive it all. This is a story about trust, deception, and the terrifying lengths some people will go to for money. But most importantly, it's about one woman's fight to protect herself and her child when everyone around her tried to convince her she was losing her mind. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Sarah Reynolds stood in her spacious kitchen, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle waterfront. At 7 months pregnant, she moved with careful grace, one hand supporting her growing belly as she sorted through the afternoon mail. Bills, charity invitations, a few personal letters. Nothing unusual until her fingers found the heavy cream envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead bearing an elegant logo, Jessica Kane, Personal Life Consulting Services. Below it, an itemized invoice that made Sarah's blood run cold. Professional consultation services, $4,000. Spa and wellness treatments, $8,000. Wardrobe consulting and personal shopping, $12,000. Emotional support and counseling sessions, $23,000. Total amount due $47,000. At the bottom, in flowing script, services provided to Marcus Reynolds as discussed. Payment due within 30 days. Sarah sank onto a kitchen stool, her mind reeling. Marcus had never mentioned any Jessica Kane. As the founder of a veterans nonprofit organization, Sarah knew every consultant and service provider in their professional circle. This name was completely foreign. Her husband's tech company, Green Tech Solutions, was weeks away from going public. The initial public offering would be worth over $200 million, transforming them from comfortable to genuinely wealthy. Sarah had always handled their personal finances, and she had never seen any payments to this woman. The front door chimed, and Marcus's voice called out from the foyer. "Sarah, I'm home early. Thought we could work on the nursery." Sarah quickly folded the invoice, her heart pounding. Should she confront him immediately? Demand an explanation? Something about the document's formal tone and the massive sum involved made her pause. This wasn't a simple business expense that had slipped through the cracks. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, tall and confident in his tailored suit, dark hair slightly disheveled from his habit of running his hands through it during stressful meetings. For 8 years, she had found this gesture endearing. Today, it looked calculated. "How was your day?" he asked, moving to kiss her cheek. Sarah noticed he smelled different, not his usual cologne, but something floral and feminine. "Fine," she managed, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "The donor's gala invitations arrived. I need to finalize the seating chart." Marcus nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone. "Great. Listen, I might be late tomorrow night. Big investor meeting about the IPO. Robert Williams is flying in from New York specifically to meet with me." Sarah studied his face as he spoke. In their 8 years together, she had become an expert at reading his expressions. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way his left hand fidgeted with his wedding ring. These were tells she recognized from his most stressful business negotiations. "Will you be dining out?" she asked carefully. "Probably. You know how these things go. Dinner, drinks, maybe a club afterward to keep the conversation flowing." He looked up from his phone, offering his most charming smile. "Don't wait up. You need your rest." The casual dismissal stung more than it should have. 6 months ago, Marcus would have apologized profusely for missing dinner. He would have brought her favorite dessert as a peace offering and spent an hour rubbing her feet while telling her about his day. "When had that changed, Marcus?" she said softly. Is everything okay with us? I mean, you seem distracted lately. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Then his expression smoothed back into practiced confidence. Everything's perfect, sweetheart. I'm just focused on getting through the IPO. Once that's done, we'll take a baby moon somewhere tropical. Just you, me, and our little one. He placed his hand on her belly, and Sarah felt their daughter kick in response. The gesture that once filled her with joy now felt hollow, like a performance for an invisible audience. That evening, after Marcus left for what he claimed was a conference call with overseas investors, Sarah sat alone in her home office. The invoice lay spread before her like evidence of a crime. She opened her laptop and typed Jessica Kane Personal Life Consulting into the search bar. The results were limited but troubling. A professional website with stock photos and vague descriptions of lifestyle optimization services for high net worth individuals. A LinkedIn profile with no employment history beyond the past year. A few society page photos from charity events Sarah herself had attended, though she had no memory of meeting this woman. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. Love you both. She stared at the message, noting that he had sent it at 9:47 p.m. According to his calendar, which they shared, the overseas call was scheduled for 6 p.m. Pacific time. Even accounting for time zones, no business call ran nearly 4 hours. Sarah pressed her hand to her belly, feeling her daughter's gentle movements. Whatever was happening in her marriage, she needed to protect this child. And that meant finding out exactly who Jessica Kane was and what services she was providing to Sarah's husband. The perfect life she had built was about to shatter. But as Sarah closed the laptop and headed upstairs, she had no idea how devastating the truth would be. Sarah spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling, her mind churning through possibilities. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would investigate Jessica Kane quietly and methodically. If there was an innocent explanation, she would apologize to Marcus for doubting him. If not, she would be prepared. The next morning, Marcus left early for what he claimed was a breakfast meeting with potential investors. Sarah waited 30 minutes after his departure, then drove to her downtown office. The Veterans Recovery Foundation occupied a modest suite in a converted warehouse, but it had become one of Seattle's most respected nonprofit organizations under Sarah's leadership. Her assistant, Jennifer Mills, looked up from her computer as Sarah entered. You're early today. Everything okay? Sarah had known Jennifer for 3 years. The young woman was discreet, intelligent, and had previously worked for a private investigation firm before joining the nonprofit sector. I need a favor, Sarah said quietly, closing her office door. I need some information about someone, but I'd prefer to keep this confidential. Jennifer's expression grew concerned. Of course. What do you need? Sarah handed her a copy of the invoice. Everything you can find about Jessica Kane. Business records, social media, anything that might explain this. Jennifer studied the document, her eyebrows rising at the total amount. $47,000 for consulting services. What kind of consulting? That's what I need to find out. 3 hours later, Jennifer knocked on Sarah's door with a manila folder. I found some interesting information, she said, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. Jessica Kane appears to have started her consulting business exactly 14 months ago. Before that, there's almost no digital footprint. Jennifer opened the folder, revealing printouts of social media profiles, business registration documents, and several photographs. Her LinkedIn says she specializes in personal brand optimization for executives. Her client list is confidential, but I found something concerning. She placed a photograph on the desk. It showed Marcus and Jessica at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. Jessica was stunning, blonde, elegant, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Marcus was leaning toward her, his hand covering hers on the table. Sarah's chest tightened. Where did you find this? Her Instagram account. It's mostly professional content, but she posted this 6 weeks ago with the caption, Strategic Planning Dinner with an Innovative Leader in Sustainable Technology. Sarah recognized the restaurant. It was Le Bernardin, where she and Marcus had celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary. The same private corner table where he had first told her he wanted children. There's more, Jennifer continued, her voice gentle. I checked the business registration for her consulting company. The address listed is a luxury apartment complex in Belltown. Rent for a two-bedroom unit there runs about $5,000 per month. Sarah did the math quickly. Even if Jessica was successful, a new consultant would need multiple high-paying clients to afford such an expensive lifestyle. The invoice suggested Marcus alone was paying her nearly $50,000 for undefined services. I also found this, Jennifer said, placing another photograph on the desk. This one showed Jessica wearing a distinctive sapphire necklace, the same necklace Marcus had given Sarah for their 7th anniversary, claiming it was a family heirloom from his grandmother. The room seemed to spin slightly. Sarah gripped the edge of her desk, fighting a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Sarah, Jennifer's voice seemed to come from far away. Do you need some water? Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe deeply. When she opened them, Jennifer was watching her with obvious concern. I'm okay, Sarah said, though she was anything but. Can you give me some time to process this? Jennifer nodded and quietly left the office. Sarah sat alone, staring at the photographs. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Her husband was having an affair, and apparently it was an expensive one. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, though that cut deep. It was the calculated nature of it. Marcus had given his mistress Sarah's anniversary gift. He had taken her to their special restaurant. Every romantic gesture in their marriage had been recycled for another woman. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Investor meeting went great. Taking the team out to celebrate. We'll be late again tonight. Order something healthy for dinner. Love you. She stared at the message, noting its casual tone. No apology for missing another evening together. No acknowledgement that his pregnant wife might want company or support. Just an instruction to order something healthy, as if she were a child who couldn't be trusted to feed herself properly. That evening, Sarah sat in her living room with a cup of herbal tea, waiting. She had made a decision. When Marcus came home, she would confront him calmly and directly. She would give him a chance to explain the invoice, the photographs, the lies. It was nearly midnight when she heard his key in the front door. Marcus entered quietly, obviously trying not to wake her. Sarah watched from the darkened living room as he moved through the foyer, noting his slightly unsteady gait and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. We need to talk, she said softly. Marcus jumped, spinning toward the sound of her voice. Sarah, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark? She turned on the lamp beside her chair, illuminating the coffee table where she had placed the invoice and photographs. Marcus's face went pale as he recognized the documents. I can explain, he said quickly, moving toward her with his hands raised in a placating gesture. Then explain. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. Explain why your business consultant has a $47,000 invoice for spa treatments and emotional support. Explain why she's wearing my anniversary necklace. Explain why you took her to our restaurant. Marcus sat heavily in the chair across from her, his confident facade crumbling. For a moment, he looked like a stranger, someone she had never met, never married, never loved. It's not what you think, he said finally, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Then tell me what it is, Marcus, because right now, it looks like my husband is having an affair and spending $50,000 on his mistress while I'm 7 months pregnant with his child. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside, Seattle's city lights twinkled through the rain-streaked windows. Inside, 8 years of marriage hung in the balance. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You're right. I'm having an affair. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, a sensation like a building's foundation cracking. She had known, of course. The evidence was overwhelming. But hearing Marcus confirm her worst fears felt like dying and being reborn in the same moment. How long? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, that familiar gesture now looking desperate rather than charming. 6 months, maybe 7. I don't know exactly when it became more than professional. Professional, Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. What profession requires $47,000 in spa treatments and emotional support? It's complicated. Marcus stood and began pacing, a habit from his most stressful business negotiations. Jessica isn't just a consultant. She's a lifestyle coach for executives. She helps with public image, networking, social connections. The IPO process has been incredibly stressful, and I needed someone who understood that world. Sarah stared at him, amazed by his ability to make infidelity sound like a business expense. And the spa treatments. The shopping, the emotional support sessions. Part of the image consulting, Marcus said, not meeting her eyes. She needed to look the part when accompanying me to investor events. And yes, sometimes we talked about the pressure I was under. You've been so focused on the baby and the nonprofit that I felt like I couldn't burden you with my stress. The victim blaming felt like a physical blow. Sarah pressed her hand to her belly, feeling her daughter move restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. So this is my fault. Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm too focused on our child and my life's work to properly support my husband. So he had to find a $47,000 solution. That's not what I said. Marcus's tone grew defensive. I'm not blaming you. I'm trying to explain how it happened. It wasn't planned. These things just develop. These things, Sarah stood slowly, her pregnant form imposing despite her emotional state. Is that what you call our marriage now? These things that just develop, like a business merger or a real estate deal? Marcus moved toward her, his hands outstretched. Sarah, please. I know I've made a terrible mistake, but we can work through this. We have too much history, too much invested in our life together. Invested? Sarah repeated the word like it tasted bitter. You're talking about our marriage like it's a financial portfolio. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Marcus's voice grew sharp with frustration. You're twisting my words. I'm trying to be honest with you about a complicated situation. Sarah felt a familiar pattern emerging. Throughout their relationship, when Marcus felt cornered or criticized, he would deflect by making her feel unreasonable. He would use his superior education and business acumen to make her doubt her own perceptions. I'm not twisting anything, she said firmly. I'm reading an invoice from your mistress. An invoice that itemizes her services like she's billing an insurance company. $47,000. Marcus, that's more than most people make in a year. You're being dramatic, Marcus said, his tone shifting to the patronizing gentleness he used when he thought she was being emotional. Yes, I made a mistake, a serious one, but you're acting like I committed murder. People have affairs. Sarah, it happens in marriages. It doesn't have to end everything we've built. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Sarah almost found herself apologizing. Almost. But the invoice on the coffee table reminded her of the stark reality. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a systematic, expensive betrayal. People have affairs, she repeated slowly. Is that supposed to comfort me? Is that supposed to make me feel better about the fact that my husband gave my anniversary necklace to another woman? Marcus's face flushed. How did you... Never mind. That was a mistake. I was confused. Emotional. I wasn't thinking clearly. Confused about which woman you were married to. Sarah's voice dripped with sarcasm. Confused about which relationship deserved the family heirloom. You're being cruel now, Marcus said, sitting down heavily. I'm trying to explain, to make amends, and you're attacking me. This is exactly why I felt disconnected from you. You always assume the worst about my motives. Sarah felt the familiar tug of self-doubt. Was she being too harsh? Was she pushing him away when he was trying to reconcile? These were the questions Marcus's manipulation was designed to provoke. But then she looked at the photographs Jennifer had found, Marcus's hand covering Jessica's at their anniversary restaurant. The intimate way he leaned toward her, the same way he had once leaned toward Sarah. This wasn't confusion or emotional stress. This was a choice, a series of deliberate, calculated choices. I want you to leave, she said quietly. Marcus looked up, startled. What? Tonight? I want you to pack a bag and leave. Go to a hotel. Go to Jessica's apartment. I don't care, but I need space to think. And I can't do that with you here trying to convince me that up is down and black is white. Sarah, be reasonable. We're weeks away from the IPO. I can't be dealing with a separation right now. The investors need to see stability, success. If word gets out that we're having marital problems, it could affect the company's valuation. Even now, his first concern was the business, not their marriage, not their unborn child, not Sarah's emotional well-being. The IPO valuation was his priority. Then you should have thought of that before you started your expensive affair, Sarah said, moving toward the stairs. I'll be in the guest room tonight. I expect you to be gone in the morning. As she climbed the stairs, she heard Marcus calling after her. Sarah, you're making a mistake. We can fix this. Don't throw away 8 years over a temporary problem. Sarah paused on the landing, looking down at the man she had married. In the foyer's soft lighting, he looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident CEO persona had fallen away, revealing something desperate and unappealing underneath. It's not temporary, Marcus, she said sadly, and it's not a problem. It's who you are. That night, Sarah lay awake in the guest room, feeling her daughter's movements as if the baby sensed the upheaval in their world. She thought about the future she had planned: Marcus coaching, Little League, family vacations, growing old together. All of it based on a lie. The man sleeping down the hall wasn't the person she had fallen in love with. Maybe he had never been that person. Maybe she had constructed an idealized version of Marcus in her mind, ignoring the warning signs that now seemed obvious in retrospect. By morning, Sarah had made a decision. She would not be gaslit, manipulated, or made to feel responsible for Marcus's betrayal. She would protect herself and her child, no matter the cost. When she woke, Marcus was gone, but the real battle was just beginning. 3 days later, Marcus returned with flowers, apologies, and a promise that would prove to be another lie. He stood on their front porch holding 24 white roses, Sarah's favorite, and wore the expression of a man who had seen the error of his ways. I ended it, he said before Sarah could speak. I told Jessica that our professional relationship is terminated, and I've instructed my lawyer to handle any remaining contractual obligations. I want to save our marriage, Sarah. I want to save our family. Sarah stood in the doorway, her hand protectively placed over her growing belly. She wanted to believe him. The alternative, raising her daughter alone, dividing their assets, explaining to everyone why their perfect marriage had imploded, felt overwhelming. How do I know you're telling the truth? She asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a text message thread with Jessica. The final message, sent 2 hours earlier, read, "This arrangement is terminated immediately. Please direct all future communication through my attorney." And this, Marcus continued, producing a business card for a marriage counselor. Dr. Patricia Hammond, I've already called her office. We can start this week if you're willing. Sarah took the card, studying the elegant lettering. Dr. Hammond specialized in couples therapy, particularly for high-stress professionals dealing with infidelity and trust issues. I've also done something else, Marcus said, his voice softening. I've set up a separate checking account in your name only. $500,000 to start. If I ever betray your trust again, you'll have immediate access to resources, no lawyers, no negotiations, just security for you and our baby. The gesture felt significant. Marcus was a careful man with money. Transferring $500,000 to her personal account represented a real commitment to change. Sarah felt her resistance beginning to weaken. And the IPO, she asked. If this gets out, I've handled it, Marcus assured her. As far as the investors are concerned, Jessica was a short-term consultant whose contract expired. The timing actually works in our favor. It shows we're streamlining operations ahead of going public. Over the following 2 weeks, Marcus seemed to transform back into the man Sarah had married. He came home by 6 every evening, brought her favorite ice cream, and spent hours talking to her belly, reading to their unborn daughter. He scheduled weekend tours of maternity wards and attended every prenatal appointment. The marriage counseling sessions were productive. Dr. Hammond helped them establish new communication patterns and rebuild intimacy. Marcus was vulnerable, admitting to the pressure he felt to succeed and his fear that the IPO's demands were changing him into someone he didn't recognize. I lost sight of what mattered, he told Dr. Hammond during their 3rd session. The business became more important than my marriage, and that's inexcusable. Sarah is carrying our child, And instead of supporting her, I sought validation from someone who didn't matter. Sarah found herself falling in love with her husband all over again. This version of Marcus, vulnerable, accountable, devoted, reminded her why she had married him in the first place. The false security lasted exactly 16 days. Sarah discovered the truth while organizing Marcus's home office for tax preparation. Hidden in a folder labeled Miscellaneous Business Expenses was a receipt from a luxury car dealership. The date was 5 days after Marcus had supposedly ended his relationship with Jessica. The purchase, a $30,000 BMW, registered to Jessica Kane. Sarah stared at the receipt, her heart pounding. The timing was unmistakable. While Marcus was bringing her flowers and promising faithfulness, he had bought his mistress a car worth more than many people's annual salary. She searched deeper through his files and found more evidence. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants she didn't recognize. Hotel receipts from nights when Marcus claimed to be working late at the office. A jewelry store receipt for diamond earrings purchased 3 weeks after their reconciliation began. The pattern was clear. Marcus hadn't ended the affair. He had simply become more careful about hiding it. Sarah sat at his desk, surrounded by evidence of his continued deception, and felt something inside her break beyond repair. The reconciliation, the counseling sessions, the romantic gestures, all of it had been an elaborate performance designed to keep her compliant while he continued his betrayal. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Meeting running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you and baby girl." Sarah looked at the timestamp, 6:15 p.m. According to his calendar, he had no meetings scheduled after 4. She opened the location services on his phone, a feature they had enabled for safety after a previous business trip went awry. Marcus was at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, the same location listed on one of the receipts. Without thinking clearly, Sarah grabbed her keys and drove downtown. The Fairmont was Seattle's premier luxury hotel, a place where Marcus had once proposed during their second year of dating. The irony wasn't lost on her. She waited in the elegant lobby, positioned where she could see the elevators without being immediately visible. At 7:30, Marcus emerged from an elevator with Jessica Kane. In person, Jessica was even more stunning than her photograph suggested. She wore a red dress that hugged her figure perfectly, and the diamond earrings Marcus had purchased glittered at her ears. They walked through the lobby like a couple, completely at ease, Marcus's hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Sarah felt her daughter kick, as if sensing her mother's distress. She placed both hands on her belly, whispering softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's going to take care of everything." She followed them outside, where a valet brought the new BMW to the curb. Jessica kissed Marcus goodbye, not a casual peck, but the deep, passionate kiss of lovers. Marcus helped her into the car, then stood watching as she drove away. Sarah waited until Marcus had retrieved his own car before driving home. By the time he arrived, she was sitting in the living room with the receipts spread across the coffee table like evidence in a criminal trial. Marcus walked in, already reaching for his phone to text what she now knew would be another lie about his evening. When he saw her sitting there, his face went pale. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her churning emotions. "Sarah, I can explain." "No," she interrupted. "You can't, because there is no explanation for this level of betrayal. You didn't end the affair. You bought her a car while you were in couples therapy with me. You've been lying to Dr. Hammond, lying to me, and lying to yourself." Marcus moved toward her, his hands raised in that familiar placating gesture. "It's complicated. The business relationship couldn't end immediately. There were contracts, obligations." "Stop," Sarah said, standing slowly. "Just stop lying. I saw you at the Fairmont. I saw you kiss her goodbye. I saw her wearing the earrings you bought her while telling me you wanted to save our marriage." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus sank into a chair, his facade crumbling completely. "I tried to end it," he said quietly. "I wanted to end it, but Jessica, she has information that could hurt the company, hurt both of us financially. I couldn't just cut her off." "Information?" Sarah's voice was sharp. "What kind of information?" Marcus looked up, and Sarah saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Not the manageable stress of being caught in an affair, but the terror of someone facing true consequences. "She knows about some of the early investor meetings," Marcus said reluctantly. Some things were said, promises made, that might not look good to the SEC if they came to light during the IPO process. Sarah felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. Are you telling me that your mistress is blackmailing you? It's not blackmail exactly. It's more like mutual assured destruction. She knows I can't afford to have her angry with me right now. The implications were staggering. Not only was Marcus having an affair, but his mistress had leverage over their financial future. The IPO that was supposed to secure their daughter's future was now hostage to his infidelity. Sarah looked at the man she had married, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. He wasn't a flawed husband who had made a mistake. He was a man who had systematically betrayed every trust she had placed in him, and who lacked the courage to face the consequences of his choices. I want you out of this house, she said quietly. Tonight, permanently. Sarah, please, think about what you're saying. The IPO is 3 weeks away. If we separate now, it will raise questions, affect the valuation. We could lose millions. Even now, his primary concern was money, not their marriage, not their child, not the emotional devastation he had caused, the potential financial impact. Let me be very clear, Sarah said, standing and moving toward the stairs. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the IPO. I don't care about your business reputation or your investor relationships. I care about my daughter having a father who isn't a liar and a coward. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at Marcus one final time. You have 1 hour to pack your things. If you're still here when I come downstairs, I'm calling the police. As Sarah climbed the stairs, she heard Marcus's voice behind her, pleading and desperate. But she had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Tomorrow, she would call a lawyer. Tonight, she would protect her daughter and herself from any further damage. The false security was over. The real fight was about to begin. Sarah's divorce attorney, Thomas Bradley, was a Harvard Law graduate who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. She had chosen him specifically for his reputation as someone who didn't intimidate easily and who understood the complex financial structures of tech companies. The timing is actually in your favor, Thomas explained during their first meeting. Filing before the IPO goes public gives you stronger claims on the company's future value. Once those shares hit the market, the calculations become much more complicated. Thomas was methodical, precise, and reassuringly confident. He had handled divorces involving tech founders before and understood both the legal and PR implications of such cases. However, Thomas continued, I need you to prepare for Marcus and his legal team to fight aggressively. Men like your husband don't give up wealth easily, especially when they believe they can manipulate the situation to their advantage. Sarah had already experienced Marcus's manipulation tactics firsthand. Since moving out of their house, he had embarked on a campaign to paint himself as the wrong party. He told friends and business associates that Sarah was experiencing hormonal mood swings due to her pregnancy and was threatening divorce over minor marital disagreements. He's claiming that you're unstable, Thomas said bluntly. His attorney has already suggested that pregnancy hormones are affecting your judgment and that you'll come to your senses after the baby's born. The strategy was both predictable and infuriating. Marcus was using her pregnancy, the very condition that should have made him more protective and supportive, as evidence of her incompetence. Let them try, Sarah said grimly. I have documentation of everything. The affair, the financial deception, the blackmail situation he mentioned. I'm not the unstable one in this marriage. Thomas nodded approvingly. Documentation will be crucial. In Washington state, we have no-fault divorce laws, but evidence of adultery and financial irresponsibility can still influence asset distribution, especially when children are involved. Over the next week, Sarah worked with Thomas to build their case. They documented Marcus's affair, the $50,000 payments to Jessica Kane, and the continued relationship despite his promises to end it. They traced the financial flow from Marcus's business accounts to Jessica's personal expenses, creating a clear picture of marital assets being used to support an extramarital relationship. Sarah also provided evidence of her contributions to Marcus's business success. Email threads showing her introductions to potential investors, photographs of her speaking at industry events on behalf of green tech solutions, and documentation of the nonprofit contacts who had provided crucial early funding for Marcus's company. You're not just a spouse seeking alimony, Thomas explained. You're a business partner whose contributions helped build the wealth you're now claiming a share of. That distinction will be important in court. Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence was strong. Thomas was competent, and she had right on her side. She began to imagine a clean resolution, a fair settlement that would provide security for her daughter and freedom from Marcus's manipulation. Then Jessica Kane decided to go public. The first hint of trouble came when Sarah's phone began ringing incessantly on a Tuesday morning. Reporters from 3 different gossip websites were calling, asking for comments about allegations that Marcus Reynolds' wife is seeking millions in a bitter divorce battle while carrying his child. Sarah declined all interviews and immediately called Thomas, who had received similar calls at his office. Someone leaked the divorce filing, Thomas said grimly. The story is already online at 2 different sites, and it's spreading fast. Sarah opened her laptop and searched for news about her divorce. The headlines were brutal. Tech CEO's pregnant wife seeks massive divorce settlement. Green tech founder's marriage implodes weeks before IPO. Is Sarah Reynolds a gold digger or victim of infidelity? But the worst coverage came from a detailed interview Jessica Kane had given to a celebrity gossip blogger. In it, Jessica portrayed herself as a successful businesswoman who had been professionally consulted by Marcus Reynolds, only to watch helplessly as his unstable wife became jealous of their working relationship. I feel terrible for Marcus, Jessica was quoted as saying. He's trying to build something meaningful with his company, and instead of supporting him, his wife is creating drama and trying to destroy his reputation. The timing, right before the IPO, feels deliberately vindictive. Jessica's version of events was carefully crafted to make her appear sympathetic while painting Sarah as a jealous, possibly unhinged wife who was sabotaging her husband's success out of spite. She's good, Thomas admitted when they met to discuss the media coverage. Jessica Kane is controlling the narrative by positioning herself as the professional victim of your supposed jealousy. She's making the affair look like a figment of your imagination. The media strategy was clearly coordinated. Within hours of Jessica's interview being published, Marcus issued his own statement through his company's PR firm. I am disappointed that my wife has chosen to make our private marital difficulties a public matter during such a crucial time for my company and our hundreds of employees. I remain committed to supporting Sarah and our unborn child. Despite the challenges her pregnancy has created for our relationship, I hope we can resolve this matter privately and amicably. The statement was a masterpiece of manipulation. It expressed concern for Sarah while simultaneously suggesting she was responsible for their problems. It positioned Marcus as the mature party trying to protect his employees and business while dealing with an unstable spouse. Sarah felt the walls closing in. Marcus and Jessica weren't just fighting her divorce claims. They were systematically destroying her reputation to make her appear untrustworthy and vindictive. The campaign reached its crescendo when photos appeared on social media showing Sarah entering Thomas's law office. The caption, posted by one of Jessica's social media accounts, read, "While hardworking entrepreneurs are trying to create jobs and build the future, some people are more interested in cashing out through divorce lawyers." Sarah stared at the photos, realizing that someone had been following her, documenting her movements, and using them to create a narrative of greed and opportunism. The invasion of privacy felt almost as violating as the original betrayal. That evening, Sarah received a call from Robert Williams, the chairman of her nonprofit's board of directors. Robert was a decorated veteran who had helped Sarah establish the Veterans Recovery Foundation 5 years earlier. Sarah, Robert's voice was carefully neutral. We need to talk. There's been some concern expressed by other board members about the media attention surrounding your personal situation. Sarah's heart sank. What kind of concern? The foundation depends on donations and grants from individuals and organizations who value stability and good judgment. Some of our major donors are asking questions about whether your personal crisis might affect your professional effectiveness. The implication was clear. The media campaign against her wasn't just affecting her divorce proceedings, it was threatening the nonprofit organization she had spent 5 years building. Robert, Sarah said carefully, you know me. You know my character and my commitment to our veterans. Are you really going to let gossip websites and social media posts override 5 years of successful leadership? There was a long pause. I'm not making any judgments about your personal situation, Robert said finally. But I have a responsibility to protect the foundation's reputation and funding. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss whether it might be best for everyone if you took a temporary leave of absence until this situation is resolved. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her empty house, feeling the weight of isolation. Marcus and Jessica weren't just trying to win the divorce, they were trying to destroy every aspect of her life, her marriage, her career, her reputation, her financial security. Everything was under attack. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. In 3 months, she would be responsible for another human being. The thought of bringing a child into this chaos felt overwhelming. But as Sarah sat there in the darkness, she felt something else growing alongside her anger. Pure, righteous anger at the injustice of it all. She had been faithful, supportive, and trusting. She had contributed to Marcus's success, supported his dreams, and believed in their partnership. In return, he had betrayed her, lied to her, and was now trying to destroy her life to avoid the consequences of his choices. Sarah reached for her phone and called Thomas Bradley. "I want to fight," she said when he answered. "Whatever they throw at me, whatever lies they tell, whatever damage they try to do, I want to fight back with everything we have." "Are you sure?" Thomas asked. "Once we escalate this, there's no going back. It's going to get uglier before it gets better." Sarah looked around the house she had made into a home, the nursery she had lovingly prepared, the life she had built with a man who had turned out to be a stranger. "It can't get much uglier than it already is," she said. "And I'll be damned if I let them destroy me without a fight." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah's OB/GYN, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, called on a Thursday evening with concerns about Sarah's medical records. "This is probably nothing," Dr. Martinez began. "But our office received a request from an insurance company for copies of your complete prenatal records. When we called the number provided, the person who answered seemed evasive about why they needed the information." Sarah frowned, shifting the phone to her other ear. "Which insurance company?" "That's the strange part. The company name didn't match any of the insurance information we have on file for you. When our office manager researched the company online, she found very limited information. It appears to be a shell company with no physical address." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "Did you provide the records?" "No, absolutely not. We never release medical information without proper authorization and verification. But the fact that someone is requesting detailed information about your pregnancy, it seemed concerning enough to mention." After the call ended, Sarah immediately contacted Thomas Bradley. He listened to her explanation with growing alarm. "This is highly unusual," Thomas said. "Medical records requests from unknown insurance companies are a red flag for potential fraud. I'm going to have our investigator look into this immediately." The investigator, a former FBI agent named David Park, worked with Thomas on complex financial cases. Within 2 days, he had uncovered a disturbing pattern. "Someone has taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Sarah Reynolds," David reported during an emergency meeting at Thomas's office. "The policy is worth $2 million, with Marcus Reynolds listed as the primary beneficiary." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "I never signed any life insurance documents." The application was submitted electronically, with what appears to be a forged digital signature. David continued. "The policy went into effect 6 weeks ago, right around the time Sarah filed for divorce." Thomas leaned forward, his expression grim. "David, what else did you find?" "This is where it gets really concerning. The insurance policy specifically includes coverage for accidental death during pregnancy or childbirth. The premium for this type of coverage is extremely high, suggesting that whoever purchased it was specifically concerned about those risks." Sarah's hands began to shake. "You're saying someone bought life insurance on me, hoping I would die during childbirth?" "I'm saying someone bought life insurance on you and went to considerable expense to ensure coverage for the exact circumstances you're currently in," David replied carefully. "The policy also includes double indemnity clauses, meaning the payout would be $4 million if your death appeared accidental." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Someone wasn't just hoping for Sarah's death. They had created a financial incentive for it to happen. Thomas was the first to speak. "We need to involve law enforcement immediately. This goes far beyond a divorce dispute." I've already contacted Detective Martinez at Seattle PD, David said. She specializes in white-collar crimes and has experience with insurance fraud. She wants to meet with Sarah as soon as possible. Detective Carmen Martinez, no relation to Sarah's doctor, was a 20-year veteran of the Seattle Police Department. She met with Sarah and Thomas at the law office the next morning, bringing a case file that was already surprisingly thick. We've been investigating Jessica Kane for several months, Detective Martinez explained. She's been flagged by insurance companies for suspicious patterns in her previous relationships. She opened the file, revealing photographs and documents. Jessica Kane's real name is Jessica Brennan. She's 31 years old, not 28 as she claims. Over the past 5 years, she's been involved with 4 different wealthy men. 3 of them died in accidents shortly after large life insurance policies were taken out on them. Sarah stared at the photographs. One showed Jessica with a man in his 50s, standing beside a yacht. Another showed her at a charity gala with a different man, this one younger and wearing a tech company's logo on his jacket. The first death was ruled accidental, Detective Martinez continued. A hiking accident in Colorado. The victim fell from a cliff during what was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway. Jessica inherited $2 million from his life insurance policy. The second was a car accident. The victim's brakes failed while driving on a mountain road. Again, Jessica was the beneficiary of a substantial life insurance policy. The third was the most suspicious. The victim died from an allergic reaction to shellfish during a dinner at an upscale restaurant. He had no known food allergies, but the autopsy showed evidence of shellfish proteins in his system. Jessica claimed she had no idea he was allergic. Sarah felt sick. And the fourth man, still alive, but only because he discovered the insurance policy before anything could happen to him. He's the one who first contacted authorities about Jessica's pattern of behavior. Thomas leaned back in his chair, processing the information. So Jessica Kane is essentially a professional black widow. She targets wealthy men, arranges life insurance policies, then orchestrates their deaths to collect the payouts. That's our working theory, Detective Martinez confirmed. What makes this case unusual is that she's targeting a woman. Typically, these schemes involve female perpetrators targeting male victims, but the financial motive is the same, a substantial payout from an accidental death. Sarah placed her hands protectively over her belly. My baby, if something happened to me during childbirth. The policy specifically covers that scenario, Detective Martinez said gently. Someone has done extensive research into the risks of pregnancy and childbirth, particularly for first-time mothers over 30. The coverage is tailored to those exact circumstances. But how is Jessica involved? Sarah asked. She's having an affair with my husband, not me. Detective Martinez exchanged glances with Thomas. That's where this gets complicated. We believe Marcus may be involved, either as an active participant or as someone being manipulated by Jessica. The insurance policy was purchased using information that only a spouse would have access to. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Sarah couldn't immediately process it. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, might be part of a plot to kill her for insurance money. What do we do now? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We're going to set up surveillance on both Marcus and Jessica, Detective Martinez explained. We're also going to work with your doctor to ensure your medical care is monitored for any signs of tampering or unusual procedures. And we're going to install security systems at your home and office. Thomas reached across the table and placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's arm. We're also going to accelerate the divorce proceedings. The sooner we can legally separate you from Marcus, the better positioned you'll be to protect yourself and your assets. As they left the meeting, Sarah felt as though she were walking through a nightmare. 6 months ago, she had been happily married and excited about starting a family. Now she was potentially the target of a murder plot orchestrated by her own husband and his mistress. But alongside the fear, Sarah felt something else, determination. Jessica Kane had chosen the wrong victim. Sarah had built a successful nonprofit organization, navigated the complex world of charitable fundraising, and earned the respect of Seattle's business community through her intelligence and tenacity. If Jessica thought she was dealing with a naive, helpless victim, she was about to learn otherwise. That evening, Sarah sat in her living room with the blinds drawn and the new security system armed. She opened her laptop and began researching everything she could find about Jessica Brennan, also known as Jessica Kane. By morning, she had filled a notebook with information, and she had begun formulating a plan of her own. The hunter was about to become the hunted. 3 days after learning about the insurance policy, Sarah's world collapsed completely. She woke to find her driveway blocked by news vans and reporters shoving microphones toward her front door. Overnight, someone had leaked details about the insurance fraud investigation to the media. The headlines were devastating. Pregnant woman claims husband plotted her murder for insurance money. Tech CEO accused of death plot against wife in bitter divorce battle. Is Sarah Reynolds paranoid or in real danger? But the most damaging story came from Jessica Kane herself. She had given an exclusive interview to a national news program, appearing poised and sympathetic as she denied any wrongdoing. I'm a successful business consultant who has worked with several high-net-worth clients, Jessica said, looking directly into the camera. Unfortunately, Mrs. Reynolds appears to be experiencing a severe psychological break, possibly related to her pregnancy. She's making increasingly wild accusations to avoid taking responsibility for her own role in her marriage's failure. Jessica's performance was masterful. She appeared calm, rational, and genuinely concerned about Sarah's mental state. She provided documentation of her legitimate business activities and character references from previous clients who praised her professionalism. I've been in contact with Child Protective Services, Jessica continued. I'm genuinely worried about the safety of Mrs. Reynolds' unborn child. Her behavior has become increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous. Sarah watched the interview from her living room, feeling sick with rage and helplessness. Jessica was systematically destroying her credibility, making her appear unhinged and potentially unfit for motherhood. The strategy was diabolically effective. Within hours, Sarah received a call from Robert Williams informing her that the Veterans Recovery Foundation's board had voted to place her on immediate administrative leave pending a mental health evaluation. Sarah, I want you to know this isn't personal, Robert said, though his voice was strained. But we've had 3 major donors threaten to pull funding if you remain in your position. The board feels we have no choice but to protect the organization's viability. An hour later, Thomas Bradley called with even worse news. Child Protective Services has opened an investigation, he said grimly. Someone filed a report claiming you're experiencing pregnancy-related psychosis and pose a potential threat to your unborn child. Sarah sank onto her couch, overwhelmed by the systematic destruction of her life. In less than a week, she had lost her job, her reputation, and potentially even the right to raise her own daughter. Who filed the report? She asked. The filing is anonymous, but given the timing and the specific allegations, it's almost certainly Jessica or someone working with her, Thomas replied. They're using the legal system to legitimize their claims about your mental state. That afternoon, a social worker arrived at Sarah's house for what was described as a wellness check. The woman, Margaret Thompson, was professional but clearly skeptical of Sarah's claims about the insurance fraud and murder plot. Mrs. Reynolds, Margaret said, settling into a chair across from Sarah, I need to ask you some questions about your mental health and your preparations for motherhood. There have been concerns raised about your ability to care for a child. Sarah forced herself to remain calm, knowing that any display of emotion could be interpreted as evidence of instability. She answered Margaret's questions thoroughly, providing documentation of her prenatal care, her financial stability, and her preparations for the baby's arrival. But she could see doubt in Margaret's eyes. The social worker had clearly been influenced by the media coverage and Jessica's carefully crafted narrative. Mrs. Reynolds, Margaret said finally, I need to be direct. The allegations you've made against your husband and his associate are quite serious. Do you have any concrete evidence to support these claims, beyond the word of private investigators and attorneys? Sarah provided copies of the insurance policy documents and Detective Martinez's case files. But even as she handed over the evidence, she could see that Margaret remained unconvinced. I'll be filing a report with my supervisor, Margaret said as she prepared to leave. We'll be monitoring your situation closely as your due date approaches. I strongly recommend that you consider counseling to address the stress you're clearly experiencing. After Margaret left, Sarah sat alone in her house, feeling utterly defeated. Jessica's strategy was working perfectly. By positioning herself as the rational, concerned party and painting Sarah as mentally unstable. She was isolating Sarah from every support system and source of credibility. That evening, Marcus called for the first time since the insurance discovery had been made public. Sarah, his voice was carefully modulated. I'm worried about you. Everyone is worried about you. This paranoia, these wild accusations. This isn't who you are. Stop, Sarah said wearily. Just stop pretending to care. I know about the insurance policy. Marcus, I know what you and Jessica are planning. There is no insurance policy, Marcus replied smoothly. You're seeing conspiracies that don't exist. The stress of the divorce, the pregnancy, it's affecting your judgment. I think you need professional help. The gaslighting was so persistent, so confident, that for a moment Sarah almost doubted her own memories. Had she imagined the meetings with Detective Martinez, the documents Thomas had shown her? But then she felt her daughter kick, and the movement grounded her in reality. She was not crazy. She was not paranoid. She was the target of a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to make her appear mentally unstable while positioning her for murder. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. I know exactly what you're doing. I know about Jessica's real identity, her history with other men who died conveniently after insurance policies were taken out on them. I know about the forged signatures and the shell company, and I know that you're both underestimating me. There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had lost its false concern and taken on a colder tone. Sarah, you're making a very serious mistake. The things you're saying, they could be considered defamatory, damaging to my business reputation and Jessica's professional standing. If you continue making these accusations, there could be legal consequences. Are you threatening me? Sarah asked. I'm advising you to seek help before you damage yourself and our child any further. Think about what's best for everyone involved. After Marcus hung up, Sarah sat in the growing darkness of her living room, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Everyone she had trusted, everything she had built, had been systematically stripped away. But as she sat there, hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong, steady movements, Sarah made a decision. She would not be a victim. She would not allow Jessica Kane and Marcus to destroy her life and potentially kill her for insurance money. If they wanted a fight, she would give them one they would never forget. Sarah opened her laptop and began typing. It was time to stop playing defense and start taking the fight to her enemies. But first, she needed to survive long enough to deliver her baby safely. And that meant she could trust no one except herself. Sarah's counterattack began with a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. She would document everything herself. If the official investigations were moving too slowly, and if Jessica's media manipulation was undermining her credibility, Sarah would gather evidence that was so compelling it couldn't be dismissed or explained away. She started by installing hidden cameras throughout her house, not just for security, but to record any attempts at break-ins or tampering. She also purchased a sophisticated digital recorder and began carrying it everywhere, ready to capture any incriminating conversations. The first break came sooner than expected. Marcus called 3 days after their confrontational phone conversation, this time with a very different tone. Sarah, we need to meet. There are things we need to discuss face to face, away from lawyers and reporters. Can you meet me at the Starbucks on Pine Street 1 hour? Sarah recognized the location, a busy coffee shop where they had met during their early dating years. Public enough to be safe, familiar enough to seem non-threatening. Why? Sarah asked, though she was already planning to go. Because despite everything that's happened, we have a child to think about. We need to find a way forward that protects everyone involved. Sarah agreed to the meeting, but not before calling Detective Martinez to inform her of the plan. The detective quickly arranged for undercover surveillance of the coffee shop and equipped Sarah with a nearly invisible recording device. Remember, Detective Martinez coached her, we need him to say something specific about the insurance policy or any plans regarding your safety. Don't push too hard. Let him lead the conversation. When Sarah arrived at the coffee shop, Marcus was already seated at a corner table, looking haggard and stressed. The confident CEO persona had cracked, revealing someone who looked genuinely frightened. Thank you for coming, Marcus said as Sarah sat down across from him. I wasn't sure you would. I'm here for our daughter, Sarah replied carefully. What did you want to discuss? Marcus glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. Sarah, you need to stop the investigation. You need to drop the divorce proceedings and work with me to present a united front. Why would I do that? Because Jessica isn't who we thought she was, Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I've learned things, disturbing things about her past, about what she's capable of. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of admission Detective Martinez needed to hear. What kind of things? Sarah asked. Marcus looked around again, clearly paranoid about being overheard. The men she was involved with before, they didn't die accidentally. Sarah, she killed them. And now she's threatening to do the same to you if I don't cooperate with her plans. What plans? Sarah pressed. She wants me to convince you to stop the investigation, stop the divorce proceedings, and go back to the way things were. She says if we can present a stable family image through the IPO, she'll disappear afterward. But if you keep fighting, if you keep making accusations, Marcus trailed off, but Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. She'll what? Marcus. She'll make sure you don't survive childbirth. She has contacts in the medical field, people who can cause complications that look natural. She showed me how easy it would be to make it look like a tragic accident. Sarah felt cold despite the coffee shop's warmth. Are you recording this conversation? She asked. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. What? No. Why would I record it? Because you're either genuinely warning me, or you're setting me up for something even worse, Sarah replied. How do I know you're telling the truth? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Because of this. Inside the envelope were photographs showing Jessica meeting with unknown individuals in what appeared to be medical settings. There were also copies of text messages between Marcus and Jessica. Messages that clearly showed Jessica making threats and Marcus expressing fear for Sarah's safety. She's been planning this for months, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. The affair, the insurance policy, everything. She targeted me specifically because of the IPO timing and your pregnancy. She saw an opportunity to collect a massive payout while making it look like I was the grieving widower. Sarah studied the photographs and messages. They appeared authentic, but she had learned not to trust anything Marcus provided without independent verification. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because I realize she's planning to kill me too. After you're gone, Marcus replied. I found additional insurance policies she's taken out, ones that name her as the beneficiary if something happens to me. She's not just planning to kill you, Sarah. She's planning to eliminate both of us and walk away with millions. The revelation was staggering. Jessica hadn't just targeted Sarah. She had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to murder both members of the marriage and collect multiple insurance payouts. What do you want me to do? Sarah asked. Help me stop her, Marcus said urgently. Work with me to gather evidence. We can set up a situation where she reveals her plans on record. The police will have everything they need to arrest her. Sarah felt a moment of hope. If Marcus was telling the truth, if he was genuinely trying to protect her and their daughter, maybe they could work together to stop Jessica's murderous plans. But then she remembered the months of lies, manipulation, and gaslighting. Could she trust Marcus now, when he had betrayed her trust so completely before? I need time to think, Sarah said finally. We don't have time, Marcus replied urgently. Your due date is in 6 weeks. Jessica is planning to act soon, probably during the delivery. If we're going to stop her, we need to move quickly. After leaving the coffee shop, Sarah drove directly to Detective Martinez's office. The recording device had captured every word of Marcus's confession, and the photographs he had provided were already being analyzed by forensic experts. This is exactly what we needed, Detective Martinez said after reviewing the evidence. Marcus has essentially confessed to conspiracy and provided evidence of premeditated murder plots. We can use this to arrest both him and Jessica. But Sarah felt uneasy. Something about Marcus's demeanor, his sudden willingness to cooperate, felt calculated rather than genuine. What if this is another manipulation? Sarah asked. What if Marcus is trying to make himself look like a victim so he can claim he was coerced by Jessica? Detective Martinez nodded thoughtfully. It's possible. Marcus could be positioning himself as Jessica's victim rather than her partner. But regardless of his motives, the evidence he's provided gives us grounds to move forward with arrests. That evening, Sarah sat in her nursery, assembling the crib she had bought months earlier when her biggest worry was choosing between pink and yellow paint colors. Now she was trying to protect her unborn daughter from a stepmother who planned to murder them both. As she tightened the crib's bolts, Sarah made a final decision. She would work with Marcus to set the trap for Jessica, but she would also prepare her own contingency plan. If Marcus was truly repentant and trying to protect them, she would give him the chance to prove it. But if this was another elaborate manipulation, if Marcus was still working with Jessica to orchestrate her death, Sarah would be ready with evidence that would destroy them both. Her daughter deserved a mother who was strong enough to fight for both their lives, and Sarah intended to be exactly that mother. The trap was set for the following Thursday evening. Marcus had arranged to meet Jessica at her apartment, claiming he had convinced Sarah to drop the divorce proceedings and stop cooperating with police. The plan was for him to get Jessica to admit her murder plot on record, while Detective Martinez and her team listened from a surveillance van outside. Sarah waited at the police station, monitoring the operation through radio communications. She felt her daughter moving restlessly, as if sensing the tension in her mother's body. "Alpha team is in position," Detective Martinez reported through her headset. "Marcus is approaching the building now." Sarah watched the feeds from the hidden cameras Marcus was wearing. The video quality was excellent, clearly showing the hallway of Jessica's luxury apartment building as Marcus approached her door. Jessica opened the door wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She looked relaxed, confident, and completely unaware that her conversation was being recorded. "Perfect timing," Jessica purred, leading Marcus into her living room. "I was just opening a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Did you convince your hysterical wife to see reason?" "She's agreed to drop the investigation," Marcus replied, accepting the glass Jessica offered him. "But she wants to meet with you personally to work out the details of our arrangement going forward." Sarah felt a chill. There had been no discussion of any meeting with Jessica. Was Marcus improvising, or was this part of a plan he hadn't shared with the police? "How delightfully naive," Jessica laughed. "Does she really think we can all play happy family together? You, me, her, and the little bundle of joy." "She wants to try," Marcus said. "For the baby's sake." Jessica moved closer to Marcus, trailing her finger along his chest. "Well, that's certainly generous of her, but unfortunately, it's far too late for such civilized arrangements." "What do you mean?" "I mean your wife has caused far too much trouble. The police investigation, the media attention, the scrutiny of my business activities, it's all quite unacceptable. Sarah Reynolds has become a liability that needs to be eliminated." Sarah's hands clenched into fists as she listened to Jessica discuss her murder as if it were a business decision. "The original plan was so elegant," Jessica continued, settling onto the couch next to Marcus. "A tragic complication during childbirth, a grieving widower inheriting everything, and me quietly in the background to provide comfort and support. But now, with all this attention, we need something more dramatic." "More dramatic how?" Marcus asked, his voice tense. "A murder-suicide, I think," Jessica said casually, sipping her champagne. "The unstable pregnant woman finally snaps, kills her cheating husband, then takes her own life. The insurance policies will still pay out. Suicide clauses don't take effect for 2 years, and we purchase them within that window." Sarah felt sick. Jessica wasn't just planning to kill her, she was planning to frame her for Marcus's murder as well. "You're talking about killing me too?" Marcus asked, and Sarah could hear genuine shock in his voice. "Oh, darling," Jessica laughed. "You didn't think you were going to survive this, did you? You're weak, unreliable, and you know far too much about my methods. The moment you served your purpose, you became expendable." Through the camera feed, Sarah watched Marcus's face go pale. Whatever arrangement he thought he had with Jessica, he was clearly realizing that he had never been anything more than a tool to be discarded. "Besides," Jessica continued, "the insurance payouts will be much larger if you're both dead. Your life insurance policy, hers, plus the IPO shares I'll inherit as your grieving mistress. It's quite a substantial sum." "You're insane," Marcus said, standing up abruptly. Jessica smiled. and Sarah noticed her hand moving toward her purse. I prefer to think of myself as practical. Sit down, Marcus. We have details to discuss. Details about what? About how you're going to help me stage the perfect murder-suicide, or about how I'll make sure you die much less pleasantly than I originally planned? Sarah saw Jessica pull a small pistol from her purse, pointing it casually at Marcus. This was escalating beyond what anyone had anticipated. Detective Martinez, Sarah said urgently. She has a gun. You need to move in now. Teams are moving, Detective Martinez replied. Stay calm. Sarah, we've got enough evidence to put her away for life. Through the camera feed, Sarah watched as Jessica forced Marcus back onto the couch, the gun trained on his chest. Jessica's demeanor had shifted from seductive to coldly professional, revealing the killer beneath the beautiful facade. You're going to call your wife, Jessica instructed. You're going to tell her to meet you at your house immediately. You're going to make it sound urgent, like a medical emergency. When she arrives, the tragedy will unfold exactly as I've planned. I won't do it, Marcus said, his voice shaking but determined. I won't help you kill Sarah and my daughter. Oh, but you will, Jessica replied calmly. Because if you don't, I'll kill you right now and find another way to eliminate your troublesome wife. At least if you cooperate, you can ensure that her death is quick and painless. Sarah watched in real time as Marcus wrestled with an impossible choice. In that moment, she realized that despite all his lies and betrayals, he genuinely did not want her to die. Suddenly, the apartment door burst open as Detective Martinez and her team stormed in. Police, drop your weapon! Jessica spun toward the door, her gun wavering between Marcus and the officers. For a moment, Sarah thought she might surrender peacefully. Instead, Jessica smiled one last time and pulled the trigger. The camera feed went black as Marcus fell, but the audio continued to capture the sounds of the arrest. Jessica screaming threats, officers shouting commands, and the distant wail of sirens approaching. Sarah! Detective Martinez's voice came through the radio. We've got her. Jessica Kane is in custody. Marcus has been shot, but he's alive. The paramedics are working on him now. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. It was over. Jessica's killing spree had finally been stopped, and the evidence captured during the confrontation would ensure she spent the rest of her life in prison. But as Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks, she realized that the hardest part was still ahead of her. She would have to testify against Jessica, rebuild her reputation, and figure out how to raise her child as a single mother. For now, though, they were both alive, and for the first time in months, that felt like enough. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the courthouse steps, breathing in the crisp Seattle air as reporters shouted questions about the verdict. Inside, Jessica Brennan, her real name had been confirmed during the investigation, had just been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. The trial had been a media sensation, but unlike the earlier coverage that had painted Sarah as unstable, this time the narrative focused on her courage in helping to stop a serial killer. The evidence had been overwhelming Jessica's pattern of targeting wealthy men, the forged insurance policies, the recorded confession, and ultimately the attempted murder that had been captured on video. Sarah adjusted 3-month-old Emma in her arms, marveling at how perfectly her daughter fit against her chest. Emma had been born healthy and strong, arriving 2 weeks early in what the doctors assured Sarah was a completely natural and uncomplicated delivery. No mysterious complications, no convenient accidents, just a straightforward birth that had given Sarah the most precious gift of her life. Marcus had survived Jessica's attack, though the bullet had caused significant damage to his shoulder and lung. During his recovery, he had cooperated fully with prosecutors, providing additional evidence about Jessica's methods and plans. The betrayal of their marriage was still too deep for Sarah to forgive, but she had to acknowledge that his final actions had probably saved both her life and Emma's. The divorce had been finalized while Jessica's trial was ongoing. Sarah had received a substantial settlement, not because she had demanded it, but because Thomas Bradley had argued successfully that Marcus's infidelity and the danger he had exposed her to warranted significant compensation. More importantly, Sarah had retained full custody of Emma, with Marcus granted supervised visitation rights that he rarely exercised. Mrs. Reynolds, a reporter called out. How do you feel about the verdict? Sarah paused on the courthouse steps, looking out at the crowd of journalists and cameras. 6 months ago, these same reporters had been questioning her sanity and painting her as a gold-digging wife seeking an unfair divorce settlement. Today, they were treating her as a hero who had helped bring a killer to justice. I feel relieved, Sarah said simply. Jessica Kane destroyed multiple families and ended innocent lives. The fact that she'll never be able to hurt anyone else brings me peace. What's next for you and your daughter? Sarah smiled, looking down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos around them. We're going home. I've been offered my position back at the Veterans Recovery Foundation, and Emma and I are looking forward to building a quiet, normal life together. As Sarah walked toward her car, she reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. The woman who had discovered that mysterious invoice had been naive, trusting, and dependent on her husband for both financial security and emotional validation. The woman walking away from the courthouse today was independent, strong, and completely focused on protecting her daughter's future. The settlement from her divorce had allowed Sarah to purchase a modest house in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools. She had also established a trust fund for Emma's education, ensuring that her daughter would have opportunities regardless of what the future held. Most importantly, Sarah had learned to trust her own instincts. The voice that had whispered warnings about Marcus's behavior, that had recognized Jessica's manipulations, that had refused to be gaslit into silence. That voice was worth listening to. 3 weeks after the trial ended, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Detective Martinez. I wanted to let you know that we've connected Jessica to 2 additional murders, the detective said. Cold cases from other states. Your cooperation in this investigation has helped us solve crimes that might have remained unsolved forever. Sarah felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. More families would finally have answers about their loved ones' deaths, but it meant Jessica's killing spree had been even more extensive than anyone had realized. There's something else, Detective Martinez continued. The FBI wants to consult with you about creating a profile for this type of killer. Your insights into Jessica's psychological manipulation techniques could help them identify similar predators. Sarah considered the offer. The idea of using her experience to protect other potential victims was appealing, but she also wanted to focus on rebuilding her life with Emma. Let me think about it, Sarah replied. Right now, my priority is my daughter and getting back to normal. Of course, but Sarah, I want you to know that what you did, standing up to Jessica, gathering evidence, refusing to be intimidated, it took extraordinary courage. You should be proud of yourself. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her living room, watching Emma sleep in her bouncer. The house was quiet, peaceful, and completely hers. No lies, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. Just a mother and daughter building a life together. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant Jennifer, who had become one of her closest friends during the ordeal. Saw the news about the additional charges. You must be relieved it's really over. Emma is lucky to have such a strong mom. Sarah smiled and typed back, we're both lucky to have survived and to have good friends. See you Monday. As evening fell, Sarah prepared Emma's bottle and settled into the rocking chair she had bought for the nursery. Emma's tiny fingers wrapped around Sarah's thumb as she fed, and Sarah marveled at the perfection of this simple moment. The nursery walls were painted a soft lavender, not the pink or blue she had originally planned, but a color that felt peaceful and hopeful. The crib Marcus had never helped assemble stood in the corner, finally completed by Sarah's own hands during her maternity leave. Your daddy made some terrible choices, Sarah whispered to Emma, who gazed up at her with alert brown eyes. But you and I, we're going to be just fine. We're going to build something better than what came before. Emma's response was a contented sigh as she finished her bottle. Sarah lifted her to her shoulder, gently patting her back while walking to the window that overlooked their small backyard. The previous owners had planted a cherry tree that was now blooming with delicate white flowers. The symbolism wasn't lost on Sarah. After the darkest winter of her life, spring had finally come. Her phone rang softly. Robert Williams from the Veterans Recovery Foundation. Sarah, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to update you on the board meeting tomorrow. Of course, Robert. What did you decide? Unanimous vote to reinstate you as executive director, with a formal apology for the leave of absence? The board also approved a salary increase and additional funding for the programs you've been developing. Sarah felt a warm sense of validation. The organization she had built from nothing was welcoming her back, not out of pity, but because they recognized her value in leadership. There's something else, Robert continued. 3 new major donors have come forward specifically because of your situation. They were impressed by your courage and want to support veteran services under your leadership. We're looking at our most successful year yet. After the call ended, Sarah returned to the rocking chair with Emma. The house was quiet except for the gentle sounds of her daughter's breathing and the distant hum of Seattle traffic. Sarah thought about Jessica, spending her first night in a maximum security prison cell. The woman who had seemed so powerful, so manipulative and dangerous, was now just another inmate serving a life sentence. Her beauty, her charm, her ability to manipulate wealthy men, none of it mattered anymore. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. Marcus was living in a downtown condo now, slowly rebuilding his business reputation while dealing with ongoing physical therapy for his shoulder injury. The IPO had been delayed but not canceled. Green Tech Solutions would eventually go public under new leadership. Marcus had stepped down as CEO as part of his plea agreement with prosecutors. Sarah felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a kind of resigned acceptance. The man she had married was gone. Perhaps he had never really existed. The Marcus she had fallen in love with had been largely a projection of her own hopes and dreams, but from the ashes of that failed marriage had come Emma, and that made everything else bearable. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah glanced at the clock. 8:30 p.m. Later than most people would visit. She checked the security system Marcus had installed during their reconciliation attempt, the one useful thing that had come from that period. Detective Martinez stood on the porch, holding a small wrapped package. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," the detective said when Sarah opened the door. "I wanted to give you this in person." Sarah invited her in, and they sat in the living room where Emma dozed in her bouncer. "This is from the families of Jessica's other victims," Detective Martinez explained, handing Sarah the package. "They wanted to thank you for helping bring their loved one's killer to justice." Inside was a beautiful silver bracelet engraved with the names of Jessica's victims and a simple message, "In memory of those lost, with gratitude for your courage." "They also wanted you to know that they've established a foundation," Detective Martinez continued. "It provides support for families affected by domestic violence and fraud. They'd like you to consider serving on the advisory board." Sarah studied the bracelet, thinking about the families who had lost fathers, sons, and partners to Jessica's greed. Her own ordeal had been traumatic, but she had survived. These families had lost everything. "I'd be honored to help," Sarah said quietly. Detective Martinez smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that. There's one more thing. The FBI profiling unit has decided to name their new protocol for identifying female serial killers after you. The Reynolds protocol will help law enforcement recognize patterns like Jessica's before more people get hurt." Sarah looked down at Emma, who had woken up and was watching the detective with curious eyes. Her daughter would grow up in a world where Sarah's experience had helped protect other families from predators like Jessica Kane. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Do you think there are others out there like Jessica?" "Almost certainly," Detective Martinez replied honestly. "But because of what you did, because you refused to be silenced or discredited, we're better equipped to find them. You've helped save lives that haven't even been threatened yet." After Detective Martinez left, Sarah sat alone with Emma, processing the weight of what she had accomplished. A year ago, she had been a woman who discovered her husband's affair through an audacious invoice. Tonight, she was someone whose courage had helped create new tools for protecting innocent people from predators. She thought about the 3 engagement moments she had wanted to weave into her story for others who might face similar situations at the 20% mark of her ordeal. When she first discovered Marcus's lies, she had faced the universal dilemma every betrayed spouse confronts: fight for the relationship or fight for yourself. Sarah's choice to investigate rather than ignore the warning signs had saved her life. At the 50% mark, when the systematic destruction of her reputation began, she had experienced what many victims know: the shared experience of being gaslit, isolated, and made to doubt your own sanity. Sarah's refusal to accept that gaslighting had been crucial to her survival. And now, in the final 10% of her story, came the wisdom moment. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the most important thing you'll ever do. Sarah's betrayal had led to stopping a serial killer and protecting countless future victims. Emma stirred in her arms, making the soft, cooing sounds that melted Sarah's heart every time. This perfect little person had been worth fighting for, worth surviving for, worth rebuilding her entire life around. "Tomorrow we start our real adventure," Sarah whispered to her daughter. "Just you and me, building something beautiful from the pieces that are left." Outside, Seattle's city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in over a year, Sarah felt genuinely optimistic about the future. She had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger. She had protected her daughter and helped protect other families. She had learned to trust her instincts and fight for what mattered most. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most devastating endings become the most empowering beginnings. The invoice that had shattered her perfect life had also revealed her perfect strength. And that strength would carry both of them forward, one day at a time, toward whatever came next. If this story has you on the edge of your seat already, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Sarah's position. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because stories like this remind us that sometimes reality is far stranger and more dangerous than fiction. Now, let's dive into how one suspicious invoice uncovered a web of lies that nearly cost Sarah everything.